60. That's what the number said on the glittery banner hung crookedly across the living room wall. Balloons everywhere, mostly gold and navy blue. A color scheme I would never pick. But I smiled, tight-lipped, polite, because this wasn't about what I liked. It hadn't been for a long time. They insisted on having the party at Mark's house, my eldest son. Said it would be easier, more space, better for the kids. I didn't argue. At my age, you pick your battles, and honestly, I thought it was just a birthday. Nothing to get worked up about. The house was buzzing when I walked in. Smells of store-bought barbecue, too much perfume, and kids running wild. Most of the people there, Mark's friends, co-workers, his wife's Pilates group. I recognized a few faces, neighbors from years ago, a cousin I hadn't seen since Mom's funeral. Nobody really came for me. That much was clear. The cake said, "Happy 60th, Dan." My name isn't Dan. I chuckled, pointed it out to Mark's wife. She laughed, shrugged. It was a last-minute thing. No apology, just a brush-off. I nodded like it didn't sting, like I hadn't raised these people to do better. I moved through the room, shaking hands, patting backs. Someone offered me a drink. I took it. Something sweet and fruity. Not my usual whiskey, but again, not about me. I caught glimpses of the grandkids. Little Ellie was showing her drawing to someone. Jake, the middle one, ran past me like I wasn't there. Only the youngest, Evan, paused. He gave me a small wave. I smiled back. That kid had an old soul. Could see things. I kept smiling. I played along. Peacekeeper, as always. Then came the toast. Mark clinked his glass, standing by the kitchen island, commanding the room like a board meeting. "Everyone," he started, "thanks for coming to celebrate our old man." Phones went up. People grinned. I stood there suddenly feeling exposed. Mark cleared his throat. 60 years, huh? And somehow Dad made it without messing up too badly. Laughter. I smiled again, thin. "And hey," Mark grinned wide, "still alive and freeloading off us. Congrats, Dad." Louder laughter now. Some genuine, some uncomfortable. My ears rang. I looked around. His wife clapped. A few friends howled. Someone muttered, "Oh, damn," under their breath. I didn't laugh. I locked eyes with Mark. He wasn't joking. This had been planned, written, practiced. He thought it was clever, a roast, but it wasn't that. It was a jab, sharp and deliberate. I swallowed the heat rising in my throat, stepped forward, and patted his shoulder. "Thanks, kid," I said, voice steady. Inside, though, something cracked. They had no idea what they were playing with. I stood through the rest of it like a statue. People moved on, music started again, plates filled, conversations picked up, and I just stood there, frozen in that smile. That damn smile I'd worn for decades, 60 birthdays. Not all of them bad, but most forgettable. There was one where they canceled dinner last minute because of a soccer game. Another that turned into a surprise party for my brother-in-law instead. I remembered sitting alone in a booth once, eating ribs by myself, while pretending I'd chosen that. You get used to being second, third, last. I looked at the cake again. Dan? Maybe that was the real punchline. I sliced through it anyway. A moment later, I sat by the back window, watching kids toss a football in the yard. The sound of laughter floated in. And something else settled deeper, colder. They think I've been freeloading? They don't know the first thing about me. I started remembering things. Not just birthdays, but every time I paid for something quietly. Every time I covered a bill, co-signed a loan, bought groceries when they were struggling. They never saw it because I never made them see. That's on me. But this moment, they handed me the excuse I never took. I made small talk, joked about the weather, asked about someone's new car. I smiled with my teeth. But in the quiet corners of my mind, I was taking notes. Who laughed the hardest? Who looked away? Who didn't say a word? Evan hadn't laughed. His eyes found mine from across the room. That boy was watching me, really watching. I gave him a nod, a silent promise. He shouldn't grow up thinking silence equals weakness. I raised my glass, took a long sip, let the burn calm me. Then I looked at them, my family, and thought, you just started something. That night, something inside me woke up. After the toast, people trickled back to their seats like nothing had happened. Forks scraped plates, glasses clinked. Conversations picked up where they'd left off. To anyone else, it looked like a regular family dinner. But to me, it felt like sitting through a performance I hadn't auditioned for. I nodded along, answered questions politely, smiled when someone cracked a joke I didn't hear. I filled my plate out of habit, not hunger. The food tasted like paper. I asked someone about their new puppy, laughed at a story about a vacation I wasn't invited to, kept my tone light, my posture open. I didn't want them to know I was watching. Across the table, Mark was already onto his second beer, chatting with his brother-in-law like he hadn't just put me on a spit and spun me in front of our entire family. His wife laughed loudly at something, probably nothing. From my end of the table, I was more of a spectator than a guest, and that's when I saw it clearly. I wasn't just seated at the far end. I'd been there for years, a safe distance away from real decisions, real conversations. I was invited but not included, present but peripheral. Mark didn't even look my way again. I leaned back slightly, catching sight of the kids at the smaller table. They weren't paying attention, except Evan. He was stealing glances at me, curious, maybe confused. At his age, I'd learned to keep my mouth shut. He hadn't learned that yet. Good. And then she walked in, Tiffany. I recognized her from holidays and occasional birthdays. Jessica's sister, blonde, loud, always knew just enough to ask the wrong question. She sauntered in late, apologized for traffic, hugged people she barely knew, and took the only open seat right next to me. Of course. As soon as her drink hit the table, she leaned in, voice bright enough for half the room to hear. I always wondered how you managed to live without working, you know? I mean, retirement must be nice if you've got something saved. I looked at her. I didn't flinch, didn't frown, just smiled like she'd asked me about the weather, but inside I felt it, like a pressure valve snapping. She wasn't asking, she was stating publicly, and no one corrected her. They'd been talking. They had a version of me that fit their story better than the truth. To them, I was the old man, living off Mark's charity. Not a father, not a provider, a burden, an afterthought. I sipped my water, let her voice fade into background noise. I caught snippets from across the table. Mark joking about his new truck, someone laughing about the dad jokes from the toast. Everyone was comfortable, too comfortable. They'd been marinating in this fiction for a while. I glanced at Evan again. He was watching Tiffany. His brows were tight. He wasn't laughing. I used to think silence protected people, that not bragging about sacrifices was the right thing to do. But silence doesn't stay neutral. It becomes whatever someone else says it is. And in this family, my silence had turned into a story I didn't recognize. I cut a piece of chicken, chewed, swallowed. They thought I was dependent. They didn't know I once worked nights cleaning offices after my day job just to cover Mark's college books, or the time I drove 4 hours to bail him out of a dumb bar fight, then told his mother he was home studying, or how I paid his rent for 6 months while pretending it was a scholarship to spare his pride. They didn't know because I didn't tell them. Now that silence had turned into ammunition, and they were aiming it at me. It wasn't just one night, it had been years. Little comments here and there, jokes with an edge, stories shaped over wine glasses and group chats. The truth didn't matter when the narrative was easier to believe. I didn't speak up, not then. I wasn't going to plead my case at a dinner table where the verdict had already been written. Instead, I listened. I took mental notes, every raised brow, every smirk, every echo of the toast disguised as concern. Jessica mentioned how some people can retire early when they've got help. Another cousin chimed in, "Wish I could coast at that age." No one corrected them. No one stood up for me. That was the moment I stopped trying to blend in. I shifted in my seat, nodded at something I didn't hear, laughed at a joke I didn't catch. I gave them exactly what they expected, and took everything they gave without flinching. But my mind was clear now. I used to hold my tongue because I believed in keeping peace. Now I'd hold it because I was paying attention. The table chatter swirled around me like wind, meaningless. I excused myself gently, said I needed to stretch. No one offered to join me. No one even looked up. I walked to the hallway and stepped into the downstairs bathroom, closed the door, locked it. Then I pulled out my phone and opened the old thread. My fingers hovered for a second. Then I typed, "I think it's time. They need to know," and hit send. The house had gone quiet after dinner. You could almost hear the furnace hum beneath the floorboards. I walked back to the guest room, shoes in hand, the laughter from downstairs fading until it was just silence and my own breathing. I was tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. When I turned on the lamp, something caught my eye. A silver picture frame sat neatly on the dresser, its edges polished like someone had just wiped the dust away. I walked closer. Inside the frame was a photo, my son, maybe 10 years old, standing at the edge of a lake. His father stood behind him, smiling proudly. But it was the woman next to them that made my chest tighten. She wasn't me. For a second I thought maybe I was mistaken. Then the memory sharpened. That was Susan, my ex-husband's second wife. They were together for a few years after the divorce. She'd been a ghost in my story. But here she was, framed, smiling, placed in my room as if she belonged in our memories. I stared at it, the image blurring at the edges. It wasn't the photo that hurt. It was what it erased. I remembered that trip. I was the one who packed Mark's lunch, folded his jeans, and left a note in his bag saying, "Don't forget sunscreen." But in this version, that day belonged to someone else. A small thing, a single photograph, but it rewrote the past in its own quiet way. That's how erasure works. It doesn't happen all at once. It creeps in through the things left unspoken, the memories retold by others until your part simply vanishes. I sat on the edge of the bed, the frame still in my hands, and all I could think was maybe I'd let it happen. Maybe my silence had made it easy for them to forget. I leaned back and closed my eyes, and suddenly I was back there. It was years ago, right after the divorce. Mark had been small, his eyes red from crying. He missed his father. He asked me why he didn't come home anymore. I told him, "Your dad's busy, honey, but he loves you." The truth was uglier, but children don't need the truth. They need stability. I kept the ugliness to myself. There was one night he wanted to buy his father a birthday present, but didn't have the money. I remember opening my wallet, counting the bills. $500 left until the end of the month. Rent was due, groceries were running low, but I handed him the cash anyway. "Go get him something nice," I said. He smiled for the first time in weeks. He doesn't remember that. He remembers the lake, the boat, the woman who was there for a season but now owns the photo that rewrote our past. I whispered to the empty room, "He doesn't remember me there, but I was." Every scraped knee, every fever, every night he thought no one cared, I was there, always. The phone on the nightstand buzzed softly. A message flashed across the screen. Marcy. My pulse picked up. I'd texted her earlier after dinner, half out of instinct, half out of need. "Still awake," she wrote. I texted back, "Yeah." Then came her reply, "I heard something tonight. You were right. They've been talking." I stared at the screen. What kind of talking? Seconds later, a voicemail appeared. She added a short message. "From years ago. Thought you should have this." I hesitated before pressing play. The audio crackled, faint laughter in the background. Then Mark's voice, my son, older, confident, mocking. Mom's too easy. She never fights back. She just lets things slide. Another voice, a woman's, probably Jessica's, replied, well, it works for her. Keeps the peace. They laughed. The kind of laugh that cuts cleaner than any insult. I sat there, phone in my lap, the sound still echoing in my head. I'd spent years thinking my restraint was strength, that staying quiet made me dignified. But they saw it differently. To them, silence was surrender. That realization didn't break me. It steadied me. I got up, walked to the desk by the window, and opened the drawer. Inside was a small notebook, brown leather, the cover worn thin from years of use. I hadn't written in it since before the divorce. Tonight, it felt like the right time to start again. I wrote down their names, not out of revenge, out of clarity, the moments they twisted, the lies they let breathe, the things they said when they thought I wasn't listening. Every page was a way to take back what had been stolen from memory. When I was done, I flipped the notebook shut. My hand brushed against the bottom of the drawer and hit something solid, a small silver USB drive. I remembered it instantly. I'd packed it in my suitcase without thinking, a relic from another life. It contained files from the old days, emails, bank records, maybe even the truth that had been buried under everyone else's stories. I turned on the laptop, plugged it in, and waited. The screen flickered once, then twice. A single folder appeared. Mark, 2007. I hadn't opened that folder in over a decade, but I knew exactly what was inside. After I shut the laptop, I just sat there for a while. No music, no television. The only sound was the soft tick of the bedside clock. I thought I'd feel stronger after hearing Marcy's message, but all it did was make the house feel colder. It was past 11 when I finally got up. Thought a cup of tea might help settle me. Something warm to hold. I slipped down the stairs quietly, out of habit. These walls always echoed too much, even back when they were filled with boys and their muddy shoes. I passed the den, slowed my steps when I heard voices. She's still in the guest room, right? That was David, my older son. Yeah, Mark said, laughing under his breath. She's always found a way to make us look like villains without ever raising her voice. Then Jessica chimed in. She plays the victim card so well, I'm almost impressed. I froze, one foot still off the floor. It wasn't anger that hit me first. It was confusion, like I'd walked into the wrong house, into someone else's life. I stood there behind the half-shut door, invisible. David again. We should seriously talk about moving her into assisted living before she starts telling people we abuse her. Laughter, then silence. Then Jessica again. Did you see the way she looked at the birthday cake? Like we'd run over her dog or something, so dramatic. Mark said nothing, just chuckled. Low, dismissive. I didn't breathe. Not until their voices drifted off into some other conversation. I backed away, careful not to creak the old floorboard near the kitchen threshold. It wasn't misunderstanding. That was gone now. They had rehearsed this, practiced it, fed each other the same storyline until it became real to them. I was no longer their mother. I was a character, a burden. I didn't scream. I didn't barge in and demand answers. I walked to the kitchen, set the kettle on the stove, and sat at the table. The tea never made it to the cup. Instead, I opened the drawer beside the fridge, pulled out the notebook I'd started the night before, and began to write. Every word I could remember, every sentence, who said it, how they said it. I didn't add emotion to it, just facts. Back in the guest room, I sat for what felt like an hour, not thinking, just remembering. There were little signs over the years, times things didn't add up. I remember when Emily, my granddaughter, once asked me, "Did you used to be an actress?" I laughed, confused, and asked why. She said, Mom said you like to fake cry." At the time, I brushed it off. Kids repeat things. Now I see it for what it was, a slow burn smear. You start thinking you're crazy, I whispered to the dark, until you hear them describe the lie like it's the truth. I walked over to the mirror, not to check my face, just to look into my own eyes and remind myself I still knew who I was. I'd given these people more than just years. I'd covered for them, paid for them, protected them. Now I was their cautionary tale. Back at the desk, I plugged the USB drive in again, not out of curiosity, but clarity. The folder opened quicker this time. I scanned old bank receipts, transfers marked gift, loan, tuition. I opened a file from 2014, an email chain. Mark, can you help us cover the down payment? I promise we'll take care of you one day. That was the story, but I was never supposed to keep the receipts. They counted on me being sentimental, not methodical. I scrolled through more folders, found scans of therapy notes I'd typed up during the worst of the divorce, notes I never meant to show anyone. I'd written, "Be still. Don't poison his mind against his father. Someday he'll see." I closed the laptop. I looked around the room, the same walls I'd once painted pale yellow for Mark's nursery, now covered in Jessica's framed prints. They want me out. They think I'll go quietly. I stepped in front of the mirror again, stared long and hard. Then I said it out loud, low and calm. Time to return the favor, publicly. I woke up before the sun did. Not because I wanted to, because I couldn't stay asleep. The room was dark, quiet, still, but I wasn't. The kind of stillness that comes after a storm inside your own head. You lie there, eyes wide open, waiting for the next wave to hit. But this time, nothing came. I got up, pulled on a sweater, and walked to the kitchen. The old hardwood didn't creak the way it used to. Maybe it was just me that had changed. I stood by the window, arms folded, watching Mark load groceries into the back of his car. He moved with that same distracted focus he always had, like he was checking boxes instead of living life. The house was silent, but in my mind, noise from the night before, every word they said. She plays the victim card. Before she starts telling people we abuse her, I clicked the kettle on, reached for a mug, and paused. My hands weren't shaking. I wasn't scared. Not anymore. Maya Angelou's voice came to me clear as day. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. I believe them now, and I didn't feel sad about it, not even bitter, just calm, like the calm before you say what needs saying and stop apologizing for existing. Later that morning, the smell of overcooked bacon and eggs drifted into the hall. I walked into the dining room. David was already there, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. Jessica was plating scrambled eggs like she was filming a cooking show. Mark returned with the milk and bread. "Morning, Mom," Jessica said with that same sugary smile that used to fool me. "Would you like to join us for a little walk later?" she asked, voice dripping with false concern. "You know, get some air?" I took a bite of toast before answering. "I've always found fresh air best when you're not choking on pretense." Her fork stopped midair. No one laughed, even David blinked too fast. Mark cleared his throat. "So? Weather's supposed to warm up." No one knew where this was headed. That made it better. Let them feel the shift. I wasn't going to flip the table, but I wasn't going to sit quietly anymore either. After breakfast, Mark wandered into the backyard to check the grill, something he did when he didn't want to talk but knew someone needed to. I followed him out, hands in my pockets. He didn't look up at first. "Need something?" I stepped beside him. "I heard what you said last night." He froze. Shoulders tightened. "What?" "Mom, you probably—" "I didn't mishear," I said, cutting him off. Calm. "I didn't imagine it. I stood there. I heard you. I heard all three of you." He looked away. "We were venting. It's been a tough time for all of us. I'm sure it has. I said, voice even. But that doesn't erase what I've done, what I gave, what I covered, what I cleaned up, the tuition, the down payment, the bail money for David you never told Jessica about, all of it. Mom, I have emails, Mark. I have receipts. I have memories. And I've been writing it all down. He shifted. Still wouldn't look me in the eye. I didn't yell, didn't flinch. Just leaned in and said, you should be careful what version of me you sell. Someday someone might ask for a refund. He didn't reply. I walked back inside. No one followed. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed. That same notebook on the nightstand. I opened it, turned to the next blank page, and wrote, the best revenge is never anger. It's clarity. That's what I had now. Not a plan, not a tantrum. Clarity. I printed out the records I'd saved, emails, bank transfers, that old letter from Mark. I folded them neatly, slid them into an envelope, and tucked it into my purse. I wasn't going to use it, not yet, but now I had it, and I wasn't afraid of being seen anymore. As I zipped up my purse, a car horn beeped out front. I glanced out the window. It wasn't the mailman, and it sure wasn't one of them. I wasn't expecting her, but if there was ever a moment I needed backup, it was now. Morning light seeped through the blinds as I sat before my laptop, coffee cooling in a mug I hadn't touched. I was trying to summon the courage to go through more financial statements, something I'd put off for weeks. Then I opened the banking app. It said, account not found. My breath caught. I double-checked the account number, the bank name, switched networks. Nothing changed, no balance, no accounts, just a blank screen. My heart pounded. My hands trembled. I leaned back, blinking hard. I hurried to my email, typing in terms like account closed, authorization terminated. One reply flagged by the bank. Your request to close account has been processed. My chest tightened. How? When? Without me knowing. I rushed to my filing cabinet, drawer after drawer. Old statements, canceled checks, copies of transfers I made over the years. I found documents showing payments I made for Mark's mortgage, school tuition, David's legal fees. Every check I wrote, every deposit I made, all traceable. Then I spotted a signature I didn't recognize, a closure authorization in my name, but it wasn't mine. Someone had forged it, signed off access to everything. A wave of betrayal crashed over me. They'd built a lie around my silence, piece by piece. I knew enough to follow the threads. At midday, I called Mark. Did you authorize closing my account? My voice was flat. He stuttered. Mom, I thought you asked me to consolidate finances. Just trying to help. Assumed? I said sharply. You assumed without telling me. That's not help, that's erasure. He paused. Mom, things got messy. I cut him off. I'm not asking for excuses. I'm asking for records. Who signed it? When? Why? He sputtered. I'll fix it. I hung up without saying goodbye. The laptop screen glowed before me. I closed the lid, took a breath. In the wall safe behind a painting, I kept the USB drive and some hard copies. I opened the safe, retrieved the drive, and slid it into my computer side. A folder labeled My Defense opened instantly. Inside, emails, scanned checks, old contracts, proof, everything I would need if I ever had to stand my ground. I locked the safe, put the drive away, and walked out into the hallway, face composed. I told myself, you may have taken my access, but you can't erase what I already gave. My phone buzzed. New alert from the main bank. Unusual activity detected in joint account 4567. They had another account, one I didn't know existed. The sun was just starting to sink behind the tree line when I slipped on my old work gloves and headed out to the yard. I told them I wanted to help with the yard work, clear my head, keep things from boiling over. Truth was, I needed space to breathe. David handed me the hedge trimmer like it weighed shame instead of steel. You sure you don't want to sit this one out, Mom? No, I said. I'd rather move. That didn't stop the sideways looks. or the whisper I caught from a cousin's wife, laughing to someone else. She's in her element, huh? I yanked weeds from the flower bed until my knees ached, mowed the lawn in stiff rows, sweat sliding into the collar of my shirt. Every time I looked up, someone was watching. Not kindly, just watching, like I was part of the staff. It hit me, how years of unpaid, unseen work had turned into this display. No thank yous. Just quiet contempt dressed in a joke. I didn't say a word, but in my head I swore this was the last time I volunteered for my own humiliation. If they wanted to make a show of me, I'd give them a different kind of silence, one with teeth. By late afternoon, they gathered on the patio for coffee. A few guests, my daughter-in-law's friends. I rinsed my hands off and walked out searching for a seat. There wasn't one. Every chair was taken, and no one offered a cushion, a stool, not even an armrest. I hovered by the railing. I heard someone whisper, "We didn't think she'd come out." They all kept sipping like I wasn't there, like I'd always be part of the background. For a second I wanted to speak, to say, "This is my house, my porch, my chairs." But I didn't. I stood still. Let them sit in their comfort. Let the memory burn into me. Because I remembered what it used to feel like when my husband would pull out my chair first, kiss my cheek, tell everyone, "This house runs on her strength." Now they treat that strength like it's inconvenient. I turned back inside before my knees betrayed me. My legs carried me to the edge of the basement door, where my daughter-in-law suddenly appeared. "Hey," she said, "since you're already up, would you mind sorting through the old boxes downstairs? Mark said we might need to donate some." No please, no question, just downstairs. I walked down without a word. The steps creaked like they knew what was coming. The light bulb flickered. The ceiling felt lower than I remembered. The boxes were still sealed from when I packed after the divorce. Old tax returns, photos, letters. I pulled a lamp from the corner and lit the space. That's when I saw it, a bolt on the inside of the door. I hadn't noticed it before. I wasn't sure if it was new, or I'd just never imagined I'd need to lock myself in. I touched the cool metal, didn't test it, just looked. It wasn't just the cold of the room that chilled me, it was what it meant. Not help us go through. Old boxes, not take your time. This was exile. Polite, controlled, chosen. They built a wall I wasn't meant to see. And they acted surprised when I didn't fit through the door anymore. I set the lamp beside me, opened my notebook, took out the printouts, financial statements, password logs, notes on every call, every slight. I whispered to the dark, "You can shut me in the basement, but you can't bury my truth." From my purse, I pulled the USB drive, plugged it into the old laptop I'd stashed away, copied everything into new folders, labeled, encrypted, backed up. They thought they were sending me away. They didn't realize I worked best when no one was watching. My hands didn't shake. I was sealing an envelope when I heard footsteps on the stairs, then a voice, not one I expected, calling my name. And whoever it was, they had no idea what I'd just uncovered. I walked into the family room just as dusk settled over the yard. The lights were dim, and in the center of the wall hung a new portrait, bold, framed for all to see. It looked like a family gathering. Mark, his wife, kids, siblings. But me? I was gone. They'd left me out. Under the image, a plaque read, "The Kettering Legacy." Guests murmured as they entered. Jessica's voice floated out, "Beautiful picture, except Dad forgot to include her." I stared. My heart sank. This wasn't a mistake. This was a message. In my mind's eye, I flipped through my own albums, photos where I held Mark when he was 5, cut his cake, sat in funerals, all removed in newer prints. They didn't just erase me, they airbrushed me out of memory. Outside on the patio, they gathered under string lights, chatting as though everything was perfect. I joined them slowly, eyes on that portrait behind me. The toast began. "To our family, unity, and growth." Mark glanced away from me mid-sentence. I raised my glass. To those present and those who forgot to invite the one who built it. A hush fell. Some guests shifted. The portrait's studio silence collided with the quiet among us. Luna, my granddaughter, tugged my sleeve. She asked softly, "Grandma, why are you never in the big family photos?" Time froze. Heads turned. I swallowed. "Because someone decided I wasn't part of the legacy," I said, voice steady. "But I'm learning to claim my place." Her eyes locked on mine. The silence afterward hit harder than any clash. I excused myself, stepping inside. I grabbed the notebook and the USB drive. On the laptop I'd already warmed, I found the video file I'd hidden. I hovered over it, saw the thumbnails. Moments I'd lived, unseen. The frame of me holding Mark while siblings posed behind. The smile he gave me before they took the photo from my hands. I carried the laptop back to the patio. The guests watched, uncertain. I set it up and murmured quietly, "Let me show you something you erased." The sun hadn't quite risen when I stepped into the kitchen. The house was silent. No creaks, no coffee cups clinking, no footsteps above. Just stillness. I made a pot of coffee out of habit, but I didn't pour a cup right away. I stood there, arms crossed, watching the machine hum. The air felt different, lighter. I walked out to the patio. The laptop still sat there, closed but not forgotten, the same way they tried to shut me out. But last night wasn't about winning or losing. That silence, it wasn't defeat. It was them finally being forced to process what I'd laid bare. I didn't cry. Not this time. I just breathed. For me, not for them. A few minutes later, I heard the soft steps behind me. Evan? He didn't say good morning. He stood there awkwardly, hands shoved in his pockets like a teenager. Then finally, he spoke. "I didn't know it felt that way," he said. Or maybe I didn't want to know. I turned to face him. My gaze was steady. "It's not about you knowing, it's about you seeing." We didn't yell. We didn't cry. We just stood there, both a little older than we were yesterday. He pulled out his phone. "I found this last night, an old voicemail. From when you called after the airport, you were crying." He hit play, and there it was, my voice shaking, pleading, alone on that voicemail. I'd left it years ago. He never called back then, but now the sound of my pain hit like a punch to both of us. He looked away. "I don't deserve forgiveness." "I'm not handing any out," I replied, "but I'll accept accountability." After he left, I walked back into the family room. The portrait still hung there, cropped, glossy, dishonest. I took it down without ceremony. Found the older one I kept in the hallway closet. It was dusty but honest. Me, holding Evan and Kyle when they were little, their cheeks round and clean. I hung it up in its place. Throughout the morning, people trickled in, some from the night before. No one brought flowers or cards. Just quiet eyes and stiff words. I didn't hug anyone, didn't offer coffee, just listened. Some apologized, some avoided my eyes. I didn't respond with words, I looked for behavior. "If you want me in your life," I said plainly to more than one of them, "make space. Don't ask me to shrink." It wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. Later that afternoon, I sat on the porch with Luna. She was coloring, her head tilted like her mother used to do. "Grandma," she asked, "will we ever have a big family dinner again?" I smiled. "Maybe, but only when everyone brings the whole truth to the table." She nodded like that made perfect sense. I told her I was thinking of traveling again, maybe write a book, maybe even start one of those YouTube channels for women like me, older, underestimated, still standing. She giggled. "You'd be good at that." I got the mail later that evening. Most of it was junk, but one envelope stood out. Handwritten. Inside was a simple card from Jack Morrison, my late husband's old friend from Milwaukee. I hadn't heard from him in years. He always said you were the spine of the family, the card read. No flourish, no guilt, just truth. I put the card in my new photo album, one I made for myself with pictures no one else could edit or crop. That chapter's closed. But the story? That's finally mine.